Welcome to the eShopperReviews podcast, episode 13. This is the podcast for April 2022. I'm Jen Ip.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopperReviews is a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviews games on the Nintendo Switch platform, and you can find this subreddit at the URL reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. We currently have over 1,800 reviews and counting, and we are supported by your donations on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. This month's sponsors are Andy Miller, Xleen, Johannes, Reddit user Rambo Fox, Ilya Zarev, Connor Armstrong, Eli Goodman, KH, Christopher Wolf, and Stove. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the Patron-Voted game, Nintendo Switch Sports.
So, I actually did a bit of playing of this on one of the streams when they did their play tests. I actually did some of this with you.
Yes, he did.
So I'm not entirely surprised that this one got chosen because people already have a bit of a preview of what it looks like. And even putting all that aside, this is definitely one of the more anticipated one of the more anticipated games on Nintendo Switch right now. So, yeah, looks like it should be good. I was actually surprised in the playtest how good the motion controls worked. I was not expecting them to work as well as they have. So, looking forward to this one.
I was pleasantly surprised by the graphics.
Yeah, the graphics, at least in the playtest, again, we haven't played the final version as of this recording, but at least from the playtest, it looks like it's shaping up good. And I think really what it's going to come down to is it going to have a good amount of content? Are there going to be a good amount of options in the game? Is it going to feel like a complete game rather than just like a bunch of little motion-controlled demos, which, honestly, my feelings about the original Wii Sports are a bit mixed. I feel like it did what it needed to do, but I really wish it had more features and options. And I'm hoping that this successor fits that mold, that it actually rises to have those kinds of options.
So far, I was impressed by the playtest.
Yeah.
It was pretty obvious to me that it was a stress test for multiplayer, which I hope it went well. It looked like it did, at least from our end. But yeah, I'm not sure if I will buy this game. I'm pretty sure you will.
Well, it was the patron-voted game, so yeah, I'm going to buy it so I can review it.
But I have no clue if I'm going to get it. My purchases lately for games has dwindled quite a bit so far this year.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Okay, so for next month, we have several.
So I should explain what's going on here, because it might be kind of confusing. I haven't really talked with you about this, Jen.
Okay.
Last month, I made a bit of a boo-boo. I made a mistake. When I posted the poll up on the Patreon, I made it open to all Patreon patrons. And technically, that's a Patreon bonus that's supposed to be for Patreon patrons who donate $5 or more. And I didn't want to shortchange our $5 and more patrons because, hey, they're giving me more money. They should get something for what they're giving me. So I decided with this next month, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making up for that oversight last month by letting them choose 2 games for me to review and not one. And what I've decided to do is I've gone back into the Nintendo Switch library to look back and find 8 different indie games that are highly acclaimed that I have not reviewed yet. And whatever 2 of these 8 games get the most votes will be the ones that I end up playing to review. I will review 2 of these games. Okay. And of course, as per usual, if there's a tie, I will be the tie-breaking vote, but you guys get to make the call here. Which of these games are the ones you want me to review? Okay.
So, stop me if I'm pronouncing these incorrectly. We have Chicory, A Colorful Tale, Death's Door, Littlewood, Moon, Rebel Galaxy Outlaw, Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, There Is No Game, Wrong Dimension, and Victor Vran Overkill Edition.
No, I think you pronounced all of those correctly, at least as far as I can tell.
Is there really a game called just Moon?
Yes, Moon is, as I recall, and I might be mistaken on this, I believe it was originally released on the original PlayStation in Japan only. And as I understand it, it's kind of an anti-RPG. It does some weird wonky things with the RPG genre that upend expectations about what that genre is or should be.
Huh.
I haven't played it yet. I don't know too much about it, but I've heard good things. It's gotten good critical acclaim, and yeah, it has quite a reputation.
Yeah,
So it's
I don't mean to like single it out, but like every single game on here is more or less 2 words, except for Littlewood, but that's a compound word, so I was just curious.
It wasn't intentional. I was just... So when I was making this list, I was looking through games that are indie games, number 1. Number 2, I wanted to specifically highlight games that were critically acclaimed but that I hadn't touched yet. And number 3, games that rarely, if ever, go on sale. So these games, I'll be buying at full price because they're not going to be going on sale.
Okay, well, all right. So we'll talk about some of the highlights before we head into discussion mode. Mm-hmm. This is for games that eShopperReviews covered in the March of 2022, but note that these are not necessarily games released in March, but just games that Jake has played.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the best game.
Yes.
Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Oh, you're not going to go in reverse order like last month?
No. I'll follow the format that you wrote.
Okay. So, yeah, the best game that I played this month is definitely Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This one, I mean, right from the first previews of it, it looked like it was going to be something special. And in particular, this is Kirby's first full-fledged 3D platformer. There have been other games where Kirby has been in 3D. There have been other, like, minor spin-off platformer-y things, but never an actual full game, a full, like, serious, mainline release in the series. And a lot of characters kind of stumble when they make the trip from 2D to 3D. And Kirby, I feel, makes that transition with flying colors. It does a great job preserving the great gameplay of the Kirby games, and you see that gameplay like this plays like a Kirby game, but in 3D. But it also incorporates elements of Super Mario 3D World. It has some Donkey Kong Country kind of elements in it where you're hunting for secrets through the level. Just overall, I feel like it does a very good job of combining these elements and making them work in a game that's very, very accessible. This is definitely a game that's great to play with your young kid if you have a kid, or your friend who maybe doesn't like platformers so much. Maybe, Jen? Maybe? There's a good co-op in this game where the secondary character, like, even if they're killed, they come back after a short bit. So it's an asymmetrical co-op, but it works well. The challenge level in this game is relatively low, and maybe we'll discuss that a bit more later. But just because it's not a super difficult game doesn't keep it from being a really good game. And there's so much variety here. The core gameplay is well designed. The level design is great. There's always something new to see as you go through the game. And I've heard a lot of discussion about the game length here. The game, depending on depending on your skill level and depending on how long you're going to stick around and try to get all the challenges and everything, you're looking at maybe 6 to 10 hours, somewhere in that range-ish, which I feel is pretty good for a Kirby game. It's not as short as, like, Kirby Star Allies was well known for being particularly short. And I feel like this one is a bit meatier, but you're not looking at a massive 40-hour game.
Okay.
But that's fine. For what it is, this is magnificent. And if you like platformers at all, definitely look this game up. The visuals are beautiful. The soundtrack is great. I cannot say enough good things about this game. This is everything I could have hoped for in a 3D Kirby game.
All right. Next for your best games is Shoot 'One Up DX.
This is one that I'd heard some good things about, but hadn't really spent much time looking into. And it's fairly inexpensive on the eShop. I don't recall the exact price, but I know it's under $10.
Oh, okay.
And this is a shmup title, a shoot 'em up kind of game where you're flying. Well, normally you're flying a spaceship around in this sort of game. In this game, you're flying a whole fleet of spaceships, and not only are you moving and firing, but you're also using button commands to have the layout of the ships expand or contract so that you can focus their fire, or you can have them, get out of the way of enemies. Just really, really creative take on the genre, and just tons of fun too. I would say it's maybe not quite as elegant as the king of the genre, Ikaruga, but in terms of just sheer fun, it is right up there. It is so good. And for the low cost of this game, if you're a fan of shmups, this is a no-brainer. Definitely get this one.
And then last but not least is Triangle Strategy.
So Triangle Strategy is another one of the games, along with Kirby, that I was super looking forward to this year. I'm a huge fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, and of course the spiritual successor to that, Disgaea, is kind of my bread and butter. Triangle Strategy is a bit more simple than Disgaea. It kind of scales back in terms of the gameplay to kind of the basics of the genre, which is a little disappointing, but it does those basics very, very well. The gameplay in this is very well constructed, and it builds on that by having an extremely well-written story. Very Game of Thrones-esque. So if you're looking for something with a lot of like political skullduggery and that kind of thing, this does that very well, which is kind of one of the established themes of the genre, to have a lot of the political backstabbing in amongst the strategic RPG type action. And I feel like this game balances those mostly pretty well. It actually, there are some people who have complained that it goes a bit too far in the direction of those storytelling elements, that you're going through a lot of story before you get to the gameplay. But I feel like the story is good enough to justify that. So as long as you're not bothered by having a lot of story breaking up that gameplay, I feel like Triangle Strategy is going to be well worth looking into.
Okay. On to the worst games.
Yes.
Pendula Swing.
Pendula Swing starts with a decent premise for a graphic adventure, which is you're kind of this fantasy character who, their adventuring days are well behind them. They, defeated the villain and saved the kingdom, and that was ages ago. And then one day in their retirement, they wake up and their house has been ransacked, and they are going off on a quest to find out who has stolen their axe for some reason. Who has stolen it and why they would bother to break into their house just to steal an axe. There's all this treasure hanging about. A good idea. The problem is the controls in this game are horrendous. They are torturously bad. Just selecting an item to interact with requires precision positioning of your character, to the point where if you're just a little bit off, you need to fiddle around with your character's position so that you can select an item to interact with. And we're talking about a graphic adventure where all of the gameplay is built on interacting with your environment. Yikes. So every single thing that you do in this game just becomes horribly painful to try and do. Just going to an item to pick it up becomes an ordeal. And how a game can fail the core basic, like the foundation of that genre so badly. Like, I cannot imagine how this got pushed out the door in its state. This is terrible. So as much as this had potential to be good, it just ends up being nearly unplayable. And I gave it an F for that reason. I cannot imagine anyone wanting to subject themselves to this game.
Next up is Off-Road Mini Racing, which you gave a D-? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. This one, I want to say I think this is published by PixArts, who's well known for putting out asset flips. I'm not sure if this game is an asset flip, but it's got that same level of quality, which is to say not great. At least on its surface, it doesn't seem like it would be a terrible racing game. I mean, it's ugly, but it's just the controls are broken, and anytime you have to go into a jump, which is often, the physics are so crazy it's impossible to predict just what the heck will happen, and it makes trying to play this game well impossible. Yeah, there's so many racing games on Nintendo Switch, especially when you're talking about top-down and kind of cartoony style racing games. There's no reason to go for this one, even if it's on sale, even if it's super cheap.
Okay, last one for the worst game category is Racing Extreme 2, which you gave a D.
Racing Extreme 2 looks good. It looks very good. The problem is, it is only nominally a racing game. This is a game where you basically watch the racing from the side and tap a button at the right time when the game tells you to, so that it knows when to use the turbo or the boost or whatever. I don't know. In any case, that's it. That's all there is to the gameplay here, is just timed presses of a button when the game tells you to press it, which barely even feels like a game. Which is so disappointing when you look at the visuals in this game and say, if they actually built, a racing game out of this, maybe I could have had some fun with it. But as it is, it's so shallow and there's just so little to play here. I just don't see any reason why you'd bother with it.
All right. So, on to the hidden gems.
Yes.
So the first hidden gem is Gleylancer?
Yes. So Gleylancer was originally released way back on the Sega Mega Drive, which was called the Genesis in the West, in the United States rather. I think it was the Mega Drive in Europe and maybe Japan. But I believe Gleylancer was not released in America. Regardless, even if you played an imported version of this game, this version on the Nintendo Switch is better. They have improved the controls. They've added a rewind feature, which is super useful, let me tell you. But one of the things that really surprised me about this, in this game, you have little backup units. They're called different things in different games in the genre. Like in Gradius, they're called options, which is a weird thing. But they're basically little backup ships that flank you and can't get damaged. And in this game, you can actually independently aim where those ships are aiming, where they're firing at. And this port of the game actually lets you assign that function to the right analog stick, which turns this into something like a two-stick shooter, where originally it was a shmup. And this added control really transforms the game and makes it something new. And I feel like this is a really fantastic port. And that's on top of what was already a pretty solid entry in the genre, a pretty solid shmup. I've reviewed a lot of shmups this month, so I'm saying shmup a lot. You're welcome, people. You're welcome.
Hey, at least it's not another virtual novel.
Yeah, I actually didn't review too many of those this month.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I reviewed any of those this month. I guess I had a little vacation from virtual novels.
All right, next up is Welcome to Elk.
Welcome to Elk is not a visual novel.
It's a graphic adventure.
It's a graphic adventure. It's a bit closer to a visual novel than a lot of entries in the genre, so maybe I spoke too soon. But Welcome to Elk takes place on the self-titled island of Elk. I believe a fictional location, which is an island that's off the coast of... now I reveal my ignorance.
Denmark?
Denmark, yes. I'm thinking it's Danish, so their island is... or their country is Dane? No, that's not right.
Denmark.
Yes, Denmark. Thank you, people. Yes, I am that dumb sometimes. Anyway, basically you play a new arrival to the island who ends up kind of playing a small role in all of these little stories of the various residents of this island throughout the course of the game. And the game is mostly about those small stories, about kind of these odd lives of normal everyday people going about their usual everyday lives. And in that respect, when it focuses on those kind of grounded stories, it is really good. Just the kind of feel that you get for these stories, it really adds this sense of realism to them. And the characters are great. The stories are interesting. The one place where I'd say that this game doesn't feel quite right is it adds some kind of postmodernist elements, which I'm not going to spoil here, but suffice it to say there's weird stuff going on throughout the course of the game. And I would suggest to you, if you're looking to play this game, don't read too much into those elements. Focus mainly on the more grounded story elements of this game, because that's really the meat of this game, and that's what works well. And I would say if you are looking for a game with some nice, grounded, kind of quirky, odd, but still just ordinary people trying to live out their lives in peace kind of story, this one is definitely worth looking into.
Move or Die Unleashed.
This game has been out, I believe, on just about every other platform for a while. I know it's been out on Xbox, but finally came to Switch, and I'm really glad it did because it feels right at home on Nintendo Switch. This is a platformer that's also a party game. The main premise is that your character constantly has to be moving along the ground or they will slowly lose health. So that's a part of it. But then the game is constantly shaking this up by adding different kind of win conditions, different kinds of goals. And it's a party game where everything is constantly going fast-paced and shifting around, and you're kind of trying to adapt to all these new changes as they come about. And it is really a bunch of wild fun. And while I'd say I didn't think that the core platforming was truly all that great, the game more than makes up for it with just the variety of stuff to do and all the fast-paced, crazy action. It's really fun. Really great party game, too.
Last one is What Lies in the Multiverse.
So I should start by saying that we received the review code for this game from the kind folks at Untold Tales. So if you're taking that to mean that I'm biased when it comes to this game, you can take it that way. But I would have put this game on the list either way. It is a really good puzzle platformer where the core mechanic is that you can, at any point, shift between one world and another. And the game does a good job of constantly adding challenges and new elements that you have to keep in mind as you move forward. And the game has a lot of style and charm to it, too, with a really good story and some really fun characters, including one character in particular named Everett is this trickster kind of mentor character who's tugging you around while he goes and does things that he wants to do, and clearly not very mindful of your own safety and well-being. And it's kind of clear that the child protagonist of this game is just so awed by this multi-universe concept that he's not really watching out for all these red flags that this Everett guy is putting out, that he's not a super trustworthy dude. So, fun game, good puzzles, good story, good characters. If you're a fan of puzzle platformers, definitely look into this one.
Okay. So, real quick, other noteworthy reviews. Nintendo Switch Online expansion packs, Nintendo 64 app, and Sega Genesis app have their releases for March 2022. Features F-Zero X, Alien Soldier, Light Crusader, and Super Fantasy Zone.
Super Fantasy Stone? So, I'll start with the headliner here, F-Zero X. And this was a Nintendo 64 game that I think most people now might tend to look at and compare to its successor, F-Zero GX on the GameCube. And GX, I think we can all say, wipes the floor with it in pretty much every way. But, that's okay, because this game is still really, really good. And what's amazing about it is, this is a Nintendo 64 game that had a 60 frames per second frame rate, which was insane back when this game was released. Games did not have 60 frames per second frame rates back then, at least not normally. Now, granted, they had to sacrifice a lot to get it to that frame rate. In particular, there's a lot of pop-in, there's not much in the way of textures, there's not much in the way of environmental detail. A lot of the game is relatively bare bones in appearance, but it's all to focus on making sure that the game runs super smoothly and super, super fast. And the racing in this game is still, even to this day, really fun. I would say the moment this came out, it became one of the best games in the Nintendo 64 app. I will say it's still disappointing that we're only getting one Nintendo 64 game per month. And heaven only knows if we'll even get that going forward. But for what it's worth, this was an excellent addition. If they were only going to add one game to the app, this was a good one game to add. In addition to this, we got the 3 Genesis games, and of the 3 games, number 1, only one of these 3 games is actually new to Nintendo Switch. Both Alien Soldier and Light Crusader were already on the Nintendo Switch on the Sega Genesis Classics collection. Oh. So if you already own that collection, those 2 games add nothing. They will do nothing for you. And on top of that, they are games that have not aged well, and they're not very good by today's standards, I would argue. I know there are a lot of people who will argue that Alien Soldier is a good game. I do not agree with that. Super Fantasy Zone, on the other hand, is new to the Nintendo Switch. It has not been on Switch before now. And while it has its issues, it's decent. It's worth playing. It's kind of a unique take on the shmup genre that kind of pulls elements from Defender. It still has its issues, but it's worth playing, at least, I would say. Mm-hmm. Which, like, all told, when you consider all the Sega Genesis games released this month, that's pretty disappointing. There wasn't one game that was released on the app this month that I would say is an absolute must-play. And there are still games that haven't gotten to the Sega Genesis app that I would say are must-play. We still have not gotten Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis app.
Yeah.
What the heck? When we get 2 crap games and one that's kind of instead of one which obviously everyone would play. Yeah. Granted, you can already play Sonic the Hedgehog in 2 other places on the Nintendo Switch. But for those who haven't gotten the Sega Genesis Classics collection or the Sega Ages version of the game, this would at least be a way to play a must-play Sonic game. And apparently we're not getting it yet. Who knows when we will. I'm sure it'll come eventually, but for now we just got some crap Genesis games. Well, a couple crap Genesis games and one that's kind of meh.
Moving on.
Yes, let's do that.
Pick a number between 1 and 4.
Really?
Yeah.
2.
Alright, so we'll talk about the Steam Deck being released.
Let's do it.
I am not too excited about this. I personally think this will flop.
It depends what you mean by flop. So here's the thing.
Okay, so what is the Steam Deck, first of all?
Okay, for those who are not aware, the Steam Deck is not a Nintendo thing, but we mention it here because a lot of people have compared the Steam Deck to the Nintendo Switch.
Yep.
The short version is, the Steam Deck is a computer device. You know, it runs a version of the Steam OS, which is based on, I think Linux, but I'm not sure. Anyway, but it's basically a computer in the form factor of a handheld game device. So, at least vaguely, it has a visual look that is somewhat similar to the Nintendo Switch. And the fact that it is a modern portable gaming device has people comparing it to the Nintendo Switch. And a lot of people are like, but you can play some graphically amazing games on this. You can play Elden Ring on this. You can play Horizon Zero Dawn on this. Why would I get a Nintendo Switch when I could get a Steam Deck? And okay, hold on. First of all, even if you were like, I am getting a Steam Deck, good luck with that, because the waiting list is at least a year long at this point.
Oh,
so when you say that you think it will fail, I think we can say for a certain metric that it has already not failed, that it has already succeeded, except that's within the limitations of there are hardware production problems for every hardware manufacturer in 2022.
Yeah.
Due to COVID still being an issue, and now due to all the problems with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they have had difficulties getting these units out there. But for those that they can get out there, they're getting snatched up and there's a huge waiting list. So I do think that Steam has found some success with this, and they will still continue to find success with this and build on this, probably with iterative generations later, to improve on the hardware within this unit. Having said that, a lot of the things that I predicted would be an issue for the Steam Deck have become issues for the Steam Deck. If you want to play those powerful AAA games on your Steam Deck, you're going to have to pay for them. And by that I mean, number one, the Steam Deck itself is twice as expensive as the Nintendo Switch. If you're looking at the least expensive Nintendo Switch, the least expensive one you can get is $200. The most expensive you can get is $350. For the least expensive to most expensive Steam Decks, double that, pretty much.
Yeah.
Number two, battery life. If you want to play the top-of-the-line games, you're going to be lucky to get a couple of hours out of that thing. If you want to play, kind of low-end games or games with the lowest possible settings, you'll probably be able to get a bit more time out of it. But at that point, it kind of defeats the whole argument of, but the games look so much better than they do on Nintendo Switch. Well, if you're playing them at the same hardware levels as a Nintendo Switch can get, then no, they don't look better. If you want to play them at the high-end level, then you're looking at just a couple of hours of battery life and then they're dead.
Steam is for PC. Steam is primarily for PC games.
Well, this is technically a portable PC.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is, this is not a console. This is basically a PC, which means there are absolutely zero exclusive games for it. There are no games that you need a Steam Deck to play.
Yeah.
Now, the counter-argument to this is, it already works with your existing Steam library. So if you have hundreds of games on your Steam library, like I do, then you will automatically have hundreds of games that you can play on your Steam Deck. But odds are, if you already had those games, you're probably already playing them on your computer.
Yeah.
So you don't need so you don't need a Steam Deck to play them. And for a lot of those games, again, if you want to play the really super high-end games, if you want to play them portably, you're only going to be playing them for a couple of hours. There are other issues as well. There's the issue of form factor and weight. This thing is huge. It is bigger, clunkier, and heavier than the Nintendo Switch. It is like 2 or 3 times bigger and heavier than the Switch is. And the Switch already is so big that it's kind of getting to where it's hard to consider an actual portable platform. Yeah. You can't fit that thing in your pocket. Maybe the Switch Lite you can. But we're talking about something that is multiple times bigger than the Nintendo Switch. Then on top of that, you have the issue with the games that are playing on the Steam Deck have not been designed for the Steam Deck. There are some games that Valve has basically said, okay, these games are 100% perfectly fine on Steam Deck. These games will probably run on Steam Deck. These games, we haven't tested them. We can't guarantee anything. Mm-hmm. And that's not their fault. I'm not blaming them for this, because it's kind of impossible to design a PC platform that's guaranteed to play every game right out of the box, because that's not how PC games work. PC games are malleable. They're designed to run on multiple different platform settings, but that also means that sometimes you can run into issues where they hadn't anticipated a particular combination of hardware or something. None of this is to say that I think the Steam Deck sucks. I have my preferences, sure, but I can see some value in what the Steam Deck has to offer. I do not think it is a bad platform. In fact, I really, really hope that Valve does continue to build on this and build bigger, better, well, not literally bigger, but better and more improved versions of this hardware, because it is super promising. And honestly, I would love to have a platform where I could play all of my PC games in a handheld form. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy into the Steam Deck as it is now, because of the limitations it has, because there are games that are still trying to get to work with it, because of the battery life being limited, because it is so big and bulky. But I see it as a good starting point for them, and I hope it's a starting point that they build on and make better versions of it, because I can definitely see if they do so in a successor system, yeah, I could totally see myself getting Steam Deck 2 or Steam Deck Pro when it comes out eventually.
But currently, I don't have high hopes for it. I would rather just play on my PC. But then again, I'm not the sort of person that likes to game on my bed.
When you play your Switch, do you play it in portable mode at all?
Sometimes. Very rarely, though.
So, if you had the option, let's say you're playing your Nintendo Switch, if you had the option to put down your Switch and pick up a handheld system and play a PC game, would you do it?
No.
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 You feel like those are experiences that are just better suited for sitting down at your PC?
I'm not... And it's weird because I grew up with consoles. Mm-hmm. I grew up with the whole, like, I'm going to sit on my couch or I'm going to sit on my bed and game. But I think in, like, my early 20s, I transitioned over to PC, and I just prefer it.
Well, let me ask you, what if a device had the same form factor, same battery life as something like the Nintendo Switch or the DS or one of the Game Boys? Do you think you might consider it then? Is that one of the stumbling blocks here?
If I could be in the middle of playing a game on my PC, like, say, something easy like Stardew Valley.
Okay.
I've been playing that a lot lately. Like, let's say I'm in the middle of Stardew Valley and, like, oh, my back hurts. I'd like to be able to pick up the Steam Deck and just continue right where I left off in my bed. That would be great.
You want something that's kind of the exact same kind of concept as the Nintendo Switch then, where you pull it up out of the dock and just continue playing.
That would be great.
I mean, technically, as I understand it, I'm not sure if it's out yet or if it's going to be coming out, but I seem to recall them saying that they were going to be making a dock for the Steam Deck. So you could have that same experience where you plug it into the dock and then play it just like any computer system you would. And actually, as I understand it, it's supposed to be pretty decent as far as the power it has as a computer system. Like, you could literally get this just as a gaming PC, plug it into a dock, and then never use it portable.
Maybe. I'm curious to see if it can function like a standalone computer. But I don't get laptops. I have a laptop, but I don't use it primarily for gaming because the life of it is significantly reduced in comparison to a tower. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you have higher hopes for the Steam Deck than I do.
Yeah, but even then, like I said, what I'm looking at is not the current model Steam Deck, but, like, successive models. Like, I definitely feel like there's a future for this, just maybe not for the current model unit. Oh, and incidentally, for those people out there who actually thought that the Steam Deck would be a Nintendo Switch killer.
No.
Oh my goodness, how could you possibly think that? Like, okay, number one, you can't even get them in stores. And that's not because it's so popular that it's selling out everywhere. It's because they can't make the darn things. There's not enough of them to go around. But number two, again, how's anything going to compete with Mario? Where's the killer app on the Steam Deck? There isn't even a Steam Deck app at all, killer or otherwise.
Yeah.
It's just, well, all the games you can already play on your PC. Which, if that's what you want, that's great. But if that's what you want isn't a Nintendo Switch in the first place.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay, choose a number between 1 and 3.
Oh, really? We're doing this
Yeah,
again?
we're doing this.
1.
Okay, so we get to talk about game difficulties in video games. What?
This is a really good way of making this organic, by the way.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
So, because Jen has done a very poor job of hiding the fact that I've suggested topics for us to talk about.
What's wrong with that?
One of the things that a lot of people have been talking about over the course of the last month, because we've seen the release of Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Elden Ring, 2 games that are on completely opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to game difficulty. And I know there are some people who see game difficulty as a measure of quality. If a game is difficult, that means it's good. If it's easy, that means it's bad.
If that's the case, then all the worst games you've commented on for bad controls and stuff should be quality games, right?
Yeah, and that's just it. I feel like it just depends what the game is aiming to be and how well it succeeds at that. So, Jen, I'm curious. Let's say you are given a choice of 3 games and you're not told anything about the games other than game number 1 is easy. Game number 2 is maybe medium difficulty. Game number 3 is hard.
Medium.
You gonna pick the medium one? Why is that?
I like a challenge, but I don't want to throw my controller at the computer screen.
Okay. So, when you're given an option in a game, do you always pick the normal difficulty level?
I typically do.
What if you find that game to be too difficult? Do you go back to the easier difficulty?
I do. I wish Code Vein had that option. I enjoyed the story of Code Vein, but that Dark Souls-like tag is very true. And I did not complete that game. Even though I had some friends helping me through the levels and stuff, I did not complete that game.
One of the things that I think people will point a finger at me for, and I think you can identify with this some, I didn't care for Dark Souls all that much.
I have never played it, and I think if I touch that game, I will kill somebody.
So one of the things so many people talk about with Dark Souls is, oh, it's so hard, it's so hard. And one of the things that people who love that game love to say whenever anybody says that they don't like it is, oh, well, you just need to get good. That's the big meme. You need to get good. And if you don't like it, you just must not be good. And it's like,
I'm not a masochist.
Well, for me, I'm trying to think how to say this in a way that doesn't involve swearing. It's like, you idiot. I grew up in the era of Battletoads. Oh. You don't know video game difficulty. Okay, I didn't dislike Dark Souls, to make things clear. If I said I disliked it, then I oversimplified things. I didn't dislike Dark Souls. It just didn't do anything for me. And that has nothing to do with the difficulty. I mean, maybe the difficulty didn't super appeal to me, but it didn't bother me either. I can like a super difficult game. It's just the other elements of the game I didn't really latch on to. And likewise, one of the other reviews that I'm sure that a lot of people will disagree with me on, I gave the game Kirby Star Allies an A-, I believe. And that game is way too easy. I feel like it's way too easy. That's why part of why I gave it an A- instead of something greater. That game has you traveling along with 3 computer-controlled allies, or you can have other players take the roles of them too. Mm-hmm. And they're already defeating half of the enemies for you in a game that was already super easy. So it's like, even though Kirby games are already super easy, this one is easy even for a Kirby game. But I still thought it was really good at what it was trying to do, which was it was trying to be a super accessible, super kid-friendly, kind of easy-to-play platformer. And in doing that, I feel like it hit that note perfectly. And on a side note, I will say, I recognize that one of the other issues that people had with this game was it had an overall short game length. I reviewed this game after it had post-launch DLC, so this was a problem that was alleviated somewhat by that, I feel. Mm-hmm. But I feel like people look at games like these too, like Dark Souls and Kirby Star Allies, and say, Dark Souls is great because it's hard. Kirby Star Allies it sucks because it's easy. And no, there's more to it than that. Even if you're criticizing Kirby Star Allies for how easy it is, it's not that it's easy, it's that elements of the game kind of play themselves rather than letting you play it. And I feel like Kirby and the Forgotten Land is kind of a demonstration of that, because this game is also very easy. Kirby games tend to be very easy. There are 2 difficulty modes in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but even the more difficult mode, it's still a pretty easy game. But you still have to play it. You still have to try and dodge enemy attacks. And for what it is, again, I feel like it is magnificent. And I've not played Elden Ring yet. I've heard amazing things about it. I really want to play it, but just haven't gotten around to it. I don't think that being a hard game necessarily makes it bad either. I think it's just, is it good at what it's trying to do? And I feel like Kirby and the Forgotten Land is spectacular at what it's trying to do. And I haven't played Elden Ring yet, but I've heard the same thing for Elden Ring. So, you haven't played either of them yet, have you, Jen?
No, but I've played games with similar concepts to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I tried Code Vein, didn't finish it. It was just too hard of a game for me. I was getting too frustrated, and even though I had outside help, I just couldn't finish it. So, oh well. That's not really the type of game I like, I guess. It's like making fun of somebody who likes bananas but not apples. Like,
yeah, no, that's fair, I think.
I think that's a very fair metaphor.
So one of the comments that you had made, you said when you start a game and you have a difficulty selection, you usually choose the medium or normal difficulty. Yeah. I do also, but kind of for a different reason, because I tend to approach games from the viewpoint of, if there are multiple difficulty settings, the medium or normal difficulty is probably the difficulty level that the game's designers intended the game to be played at. Mm-hmm. That they felt would have the most ideal experience.
Yeah.
And if I play a game, of course I'm going to want the most ideal experience. And I do not mind those other difficulty modes being there. If I feel like I need to ratchet down the difficulty, or if I need more of a challenge, it's nice to have those options. But ideally, at least for my first playthrough, I want to play through the game the way it was intended to be played.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've heard people complain about so when it comes to Dark Souls, there are some people who have suggested that Dark Souls should have an easy mode. And I know that there are fans of that game who rage at the thought of Dark Souls having an easy mode. How dare you try and make this game so that other people can play it and enjoy it at their own preferred difficulty level? And it's like, I don't see any way you can say that where it doesn't just sound like a really stupid complaint.
Yeah.
You could argue,
yeah,
like I said just a moment ago, that such and such a difficulty mode is the intended difficulty that the game creators had intended the game to be played at. But not everyone is necessarily going to be able to do that. And having the option to scale it down if they just can't play it at that difficulty, that doesn't take away anything from anyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just kind of an ego thing, perhaps.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of people who see themselves as like, I'm a pro gamer because I beat Dark Souls. I speed ran through the game. I beat it in 12 minutes. I don't know what a speed run of Dark Souls takes. I'm sure it takes more than 12 minutes.
If you like apples but don't like bananas, that's okay. I like bananas but don't care for apples. That's really all it boils down to.
You were so close to an apples and oranges metaphor, but you went for apples and bananas instead.
Yeah, apples and bananas.
Good job, Jen. Good job.
Okay, can we talk about the not so exciting thing?
Not so exciting thing?
I mean, you know what I'm excited about to talk about, but the other thing
okay, that's not really fair to Mario Kart.
I don't care for that game as much as you do.
Okay. To put this into perspective, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is by far the best-selling game on Nintendo Switch. There is an insane attach rate for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. And granted, a part of this is because every holiday season they sell a bundle that comes with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But even if that wasn't the case, month to month, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is always within the top 10 sales list. It is insanely lucrative for Nintendo, which is, of course, why they haven't released a full-fledged sequel yet. But now we're maybe getting one in a different form, which is the expansion pass, the season pass. I'm not sure what they're calling it, but it's
basically a DLC.
Yes. 5 years after the game came out on Nintendo Switch, which I believe is 8 years after the original game came out. I mean, we are now 8 years after, I believe.
Yeah.
It has been ages since this game first came out, and we are only just now seeing DLC for it on the Nintendo Switch. However, wow, what a lot of DLC we're getting. We have just now gotten the first 8, I believe, out of, I think it's something like 60 or 64 tracks that are going to be coming to this version of the game. As far as we can tell, they're all going to be like remixed or remade tracks from previous games, which is fine. I mean, a lot of those tracks are classics, and I really like to revisit them. And getting so many of the classic tracks in here brings Mario Kart 8 Deluxe closer to something that I feel could be kind of a comprehensive, like, ultimate version of the game. You know, we had our Smash Brothers Ultimate. This is going to become Mario Kart Ultimate. And so we got 8 tracks this time around. I feel like this time the tracks were weighted towards some of the tracks that were in Mario Kart Tour, the mobile game, which I'm perfectly fine with because those tracks are fantastic, actually. They're the best tracks in this pack as far as I'm concerned. There's one that's based on Paris. There's one that's based on Tokyo. And then there's one that's kind of this fictional samurai temple. Oh. And the Paris and Tokyo tracks aren't very complex, but they're gorgeous. They look really pretty. They're a great kind of romanticized, cartoony version of the cities that they're representing. And then the samurai mansion, or whatever it's called, is this really complex and creative level where you can race on multiple different levels. Like, you can race on the ground level, or you can find a path that takes you up into the rafters, and then you're racing up in the rafters. Really, really creative design. They really nailed this theme of, like, I'm racing on rooftops like a ninja kind of thing in Mario Kart. It's just so great. And there's one level where it's based on the Game Boy Advance game, where it takes place in the clouds and you're bouncing along clouds and stuff. This is mixed in with some other less spectacular levels. Oh, there was one other level that I wanted to be sure to mention as well. Choco Mountain from the Nintendo 64 looks beautiful on the Nintendo Switch, and it's a classic track I really like. And I know there are a lot of people who really like, I think it's Toad Mall, which seems fine to me. I feel like it has a visual look and feel to it that reminds me a lot of the airport track that was already in the game. But, hey, I know it has its fans, so good for that. There's also one where you're racing along a busy road on a cliffside where there are cars zooming back and forth. Overall, I think this is a good slew of tracks, and it definitely adds to the variety in the game, so I'm super pleased with it, even if you're not all that excited about it.
Yeah. So
I'm looking forward to what's to come for the expansion pass for Mario Kart.
You know what I'm looking forward to?
Oh, I know.
Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet.
You know, after Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, I think a lot of us felt like, you know, they're going to take a year or two off from
Arceus.
From
Yeah.
their mainline Pokemon series. Probably what they'll do this holiday season is they'll have a sequel to Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. They'll have the Silver and Gold generation reflected in an Let's Go style, which makes sense. That way they're cycling through their franchises and giving them room to breathe, which is kind of what I feel like the Pokemon franchises really needed, is they need to get out of this cycle of releasing one game every single year, which led to games like Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which I feel like it's safe to say were pretty disappointing to most fans of the series.
I think so.
So I feel like Pokemon's Legend Arceus kind of seemed like it would set the tone moving forward. Like, this is a major step forward for the series. And granted, it's missing a few beats, but if they build off of this, it could become something really special. And they just need to take the time to build on this, and the Pokemon series can be renewed by it. And they're kind of sort of doing that and kind of sort of not, because this next game is coming out at the end of this year. It's coming out soon. Which means they probably are not building this based on Pokemon Legends Arceus. It's probably, I wouldn't say a coincidence, but it's probably the teams that were working on these games were kind of thinking along the same lines, which is, well, geez, everybody's been asking for Pokemon to become open world for a decade or two now, so maybe we should finally get around to doing that. And I get the feeling they haven't really showed much of the gameplay of Pokemon Violet and Scarlet, or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, however you want to, whatever order you want to put them. But I get the feeling like these games are not going to have a lot of the quality of life improvements that were added in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Like, I will be thrilled if I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that you're not going to be going through the world of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and chucking Pokeballs at things as you walk by them and engaging with Pokemon that way, or engaging with the environment in that way. And that's one of the things that was really great about Pokemon Legends Arceus, was how free-flowing and how fast-paced everything was, where you didn't need to stop and read a menu every 2 feet. You didn't need to walk over to something and press a button to interact with it. You could just chuck a Pokeball with it and keep moving. And I feel like that kind of streamlined, free-flowing gameplay probably is not what we are going to be seeing in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It's probably going to be going back to a more rigid structure like the previous Pokemon games, except now in an actual open world.
We'll see.
Well, they have said it is going to be an actual open world this time. With Pokemon Sword and Shield, they kind of hinted at, well, these are open areas, which basically meant that every now and then, while you're going through these narrow corridors, it'll open up into a bigger area that you'll have a bit more freedom to explore. But really, it's mostly still going to come down to those narrow areas, which was really disappointing. But I mean, so much about that game was disappointing, so with this new one, it looks great. I'm enthusiastic about the open world elements. I feel like a lot of people are still going to be disappointed when the gameplay doesn't turn out to have those influences from Pokemon Legends Arceus. And a lot of people are going to be disappointed when, I'm going to tell you now, the National Dex is still not going to be coming back.
Oh gosh, no. There's no way.
In fact, it would not surprise me in the least if they do not even work in the compatibility into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to trade with Sword and Shield. Which, on the one hand, should be insane because they had that. You could do that all the way back in Pokemon Silver and Gold, way back on the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color. But now it's still a question up in the air of, will that feature from a game from decades ago make it into this new Pokemon game? I don't know. Because this is a series that loves to disappoint, apparently.
You don't sound too enthusiastic.
I am cautiously optimistic about this game. It looks good. I'm looking forward to it. But I feel like a lot of people, and myself included, got burned by
Sword and Shield.
Sword and Shield.
Yeah, I agree.
To a lesser extent by Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I mean, it was kind of clear what that game was going to be even before it came out. But even still, that was a lazy game as far as I'm concerned. It was far less than what it should have been. And I feel like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet looks really good, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
That's fair.
What about you?
I'm enthusiastic about the potentials and opportunities it presents.
Mm-hmm.
I still do remember the disappointments of the last couple of games.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I don't even think your listeners know, but I did not get Pokemon Legends Arceus because I saw you play it, and I was appalled at the lack of polish that I did not get it.
Yeah, that was one of the criticisms I had about that game, was it is surprisingly unpolished for a Pokemon game.
Yeah.
Even Sword and Shield, I would say, is much more polished than Pokemon Legends Arceus is.
Yes.
Which, I like Pokemon Legends Arceus a lot. It is the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game in I don't know how long. But it's really rough around the edges. I expect that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet will probably be a more polished game, but I feel like a lot of those inspired touches that Arceus had, I'm really concerned that it's just not going to reflect that in that game. But we'll see.
Well, hopefully in the next month or two, we'll get a bit more information about Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet, and yeah, maybe they'll alleviate our concerns or validate them.
I suppose we'll see.
All right, so that wraps things up for this month's eShopper Reviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find it on the eShopperReviews subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. Once again, this has been Jen Ip.
And Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Later.